So we have a small audience right now, but I think we should still start so that we don't run over time. And I want to thank very much the audience that we have for coming to hear 6 presentations having to do with women, here and now, and past and present, dealing with aspects of women's culture, education, social life, experience from all across the board. And we're going to start today, I think most everybody has a handout, which is helpful. We're going to start today with some poems. And at this point, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, a poet, Beate Sigurðardóttir. Is one of Silver City's 2 current poet laureates. She's a Georgetown University graduate who grew up in Nuremberg, Germany, a 5-minute walk from the castle and a 1-minute walk from the closest World War II ruins. She started writing poems and stories when she was 7 years old and has not stopped since. Her main interest is the situation of women in the Western world. Sigurðardóttir's poetry and fiction are widely published both in print and online. Recent and forthcoming publications include her novel, Aubrey, A Book of Love, her poetry collection, Xanthippe and Her Friends, a poetry chapbook, Dancing in Santa Fe and Other Poems, a poetry chapbook, Emily, and a miscellany of women's day-to-day experiences. Sigurðardóttir publishes an almost daily blog, Writing in a Woman's Voice, where she posts poetry and short fiction. And I'd like to welcome her.
Hello. Is it good? Is this good? Sound-wise? A little louder? I guess just a little closer. Thank you for having me here. I'm really honored to be able to be part of this kickoff of Women's History Month. And thank you to the university and to the library and to Dr. Heller for organizing all of this. A little bit of my personal history, women's history, is when I went to Georgetown and studied English and philosophy, one of those brilliant Jesuit scholars, my professor, gave me a compliment and said, "You think like a man." And it was a compliment, and I was duly flattered, but ultimately to me, that was just not satisfying. I just needed to figure out, and at the time it was not easy, you know. During the day I had to study Plato and Descartes and Rousseau and everybody else, and at night I snuck in Germaine Greer and Simone de Beauvoir and all of the feminists that were current at the time. But we didn't have women's studies at the time, and we didn't get any credit for doing that kind of study. But I am fiercely interested in women's voices, and as the introduction mentioned, I run this blog, and what I'm actually doing is I'm publishing other women's voices, not my own. So at the moment I'm at about 800 and some pieces of poetry and fiction and nonfiction that I have posted, and it is really a wonderful thing. If you would like to contribute, and I have had men contribute writing in women's voices, so long as it doesn't feel belittling or totally off the wall to me, I will post that as well. So you can Google it on just under Writing in a Woman's Voice, and you'll probably find it, no problem. Today I want to read you 2 poems, and one of them, the first one is long, it's in 13 parts. I am not going to read the numbers in a printed page. You would see number 1, you know, but I'll do a little bit of a pause. But it's all one piece, so it's a continuous thing. The title probably says a lot already. It is "To the Inadvertent Misogynists in My Life." Spirit says, "No one will fall in love with your bitterness. I say, then maybe with my sadness at least? Spirit, the jury is still out on that. All my life I have wanted to be loved above all else. I believe I am not alone. I do not want to hurt you. That is why I move into my silence, my beloved solitude. I am wounded, stranded in this loveless world where men encourage each other in brotherhood swagger to avoid the appearance of pleasing women. A colleague, male, praises me to a journalist, male, for being sensitive and elegant, which self-effacingly he postures he is not. A fist bump among men. I feel belittled, but I must not say so, though I wonder why not. This is why not. The knife pain in my upper back would dim my vigilance. Remember, I do not want to hurt you, and I probably would. I know I could. A strong woman sings, "You cannot fight for peace." I do understand you often, do not mean to damage me at all. You just don't know how else to conduct your confidence in your world. When it corrupts my world, you rarely notice. At a burger place, I stand in line patiently waiting for the next open window when a young man sails importantly right by me, never sees me. I am invisible. I bring a rose to a Middle Eastern cook's mother. She sits by herself all day at Aladdin's stand, watches the world that does not speak her language. When her son is not busy, he sits at a distance with his male friends in animated conversation. I do not speak her language. We sit and hold hands for a while. I am invisible in so many ways. Not all misogynists are male. I am frightened. Such a beautiful world, and I am getting blinder by the minute. One light after another dims the patterned tree trunks, the lines in the rocks, the grasses casting shadows in the wind. Yes, I know life has been lenient with me. So many others suffer physical wounds or trade sex for bread or even chewing gum, and the concomitant disdain. Whereas my back merely aches, no blood, no bruises, though it makes me stoop as I try to ward off bitterness and blindness faced with this world. On the mountain trails, I am sacred, if only to myself. O dazzling world, how I love you. Thank you. The other poem I want to read for you is called Wildflowers. And a lot of people assume that this is about spring, and actually here in Silver City it's about August and September, but any wildflowers will do. There's a quote that starts this out, and it's by Iris Murdoch, an Irish writer. People from another planet with flowers would think we must be mad with joy the whole time to have such things about us. Hello again, sweet morning primrose at the parking lot, dewdrops and rice grass. I am in love, I am with you. Dayflower, deep blue morning glory, goldenrod, globe mallow, mullein. From somewhere, people in expensive suits intrude. How they negotiate, how far we can, within reason, poison each other for profit, allocating blame elsewhere. Asters, let me stay focused, fiery fuchsia, golden eye, small red morning glory, open chalice of joy, and a tiny yellow flower whose name I do not know, 8 sunray petals close to the ground, while I feel tender reverence. Some bloom only a day and don't worry about cliches or repetition or how to market themselves, or for that matter how they would affect the world economy and whether anyone noticed them or not. Cosmos, mountain parsley, desert honey, summer concentrate in marigold, orange, yellow peas, wild carrot, bear grass, white stars. Sometimes it is hard to breathe as I try to balance your joy with that unyielding other world of tension, suspicion, and greed, with war around the corner even as I live, so far undamaged. Silverleaf, nightshade, milkweed, field mustard, penstemon, Indian paintbrush, moss on north-faced rocks and fern, crimson, magenta, dayflower blue, keep me a while in your wild cradle of joy. And that's it, folks. I have 3 marvelous quotes for you, for which I have time, I think. Germaine Greer, whom I referenced as one of the people that I studied privately and secretly at night while I was at college. Yet, if a woman never lets herself go, how will she ever know how far she might have got? And here's an African proverb for you, not about women, but it applies to us the same way it applies to the lion. Until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. And Einstein said, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So I would like you all to think about you. You know, one of the best things about preparing to read these poems and give a little bit of an introduction was thinking about what it means to me. And I will encourage you, men and women, to think about what it is like to write in a woman's voice. Thank you.
Don't go anywhere quite yet. Did you take some questions?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Questions, comments, praise?
Yes. Thank you.
I have a question. I do have a question if nobody else does. Oh, go.
If you were working with a young woman and you wanted to facilitate her finding her woman's voice, are there any exercises that you would recommend she would do to try to liberate herself from the way society's tried to impose on her?
Read a lot of women's work. I spent several decades reading nothing but women's work. But as a specific exercise, I can't think of anything really brilliant right now. But one of the things that I would say is trust yourself, trust yourself, trust yourself, because we get belittled, we get taught, we get there's this current term mansplaining. We get mansplained a lot, and trust yourself, trust your feelings, trust yourself.
We're going to come from a totally different direction. Was it a conversation the other day with some people? Somebody said the problem that we're facing today is everybody's thinking about their gender way too much. We need to forget about gender. We need to totally forget about gender and just be people. Okay, so that's a powerful kind of critique. But what do you say to that, coming from where you're coming from?
You can't do it until you have really shown where we are right now. Right now moving towards gender equality, but we're not there. Even the youngest people are still indoctrinated, where the men are very, very confident and told to be confident. The women not so much. When we have to start from where we are, and yes, the ultimate would be to be people, to be human beings together in this. But when we're not there, and when we're just lying about it or putting the problems under the carpet, then we're not going to get there either. It's a tough one, because you don't want to lie, and you don't want to be hateful, but you know, and a lot of my work has to do with, there's so much beauty around us, and this world, and I mean, it's such a gift to be alive. But when there is any kind of oppression, and it's whether it's women and men, or whether it's racial kind of oppression, so long as it exists, it's very difficult to be purely human and purely people, and get beyond that.
One more quick question, yeah.
Similar to that, what does it mean to write in a woman's voice?
Can you say that one more time?
What does it mean to write in a woman's voice?
To write in a woman's voice, to me, means to get rid of all of the stuff that does not feel true to me. I did study literature and philosophy, and studied a lot of male voices, and there is somewhat of a difference to me, so I would have to, I think for me it means, and to write in a male voice for a man would be exactly the same thing, to write the truth that you have within you. Instead of trying to please, or, you know, for me it's kind of easy right now. I'm basically retired, and I'm living off my Social Security allowance, so I don't have to try and market myself and stuff like that, which always includes having to please a lot of other people around you, but to write the truth the way you experience it.
Oscar, yeah, we're timed out.
Oh, timed out,
Okay,
sorry.
Okay.
just chill. We're gonna have a nice snack break, and you and Beata can get into it at that point. All right. Thank you. Okay, well, this is an interesting transition now, because we're moved to Margaret Agnew, a retired Texas teacher living in Cliff, New Mexico, and teaching English, honors and otherwise, at Cliff High School. She is currently a graduate student at WNMU studying literature, and she hopes to teach at the post-secondary level in the future. Margaret is married and has 2 children and 2 grandchildren, all of whom live in Texas. Her presentation today is in memory of and in celebration of her mother, a true everyday use woman. I want to say that I asked Margaret to share this presentation with you because when she first submitted it to me in a class last year, I found it gripping and moving. Welcome, Margaret.
Yes, very, very much a transition from here to, hi everybody, here we're back down here. I always so much, I'm amazed and just really impressed with educated women, and women who have done what many of us wish we always had. I told my students the other day, I'm an intelligent woman. Why didn't I get my doctorate? Why didn't I do those things? But today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my mom and the courses that I've taken with Dr. Heller, who, if you don't know Dr. Heller, you need to know Dr. Heller because she is fantastic. And I know I'm on a time crunch, so I've been through this like 8 times to make it fit in my time. Okay, so this is my mom. I'm beginning. Okay, all right. So we moved here from Texas a couple of summers ago, and I decided I wanted to go back to school. I took my first literature course last summer here with Dr. Heller. The course was called Contemporary British Literature. And in that course, we read the novel The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. And with that very first novel, I started seeing my mom in all of these main characters. So before I get into my essay that she's talking about, I want to read a little of my discussion post about one of the topics in that class. We were dealing with the main character, a butler named Stevens, and his father, who was dying, who was also a butler. And my discussion started like this. My mom died on the 4th of July in 2008. I call it her Independence Day. I didn't cry when she died because I knew she was in a better place and the sufferings of a difficult life and old age were over. My mom and I are much like Stevens and his father in that regard. I learned from her to set aside my personal feelings and selfish thoughts in difficult situations, even to the point of ignoring such customary respectability as grieving a loved one. Mom appointed me, her 7th child and a girl, to be the executrix of her estate because she knew I could put emotion aside and make the hard decisions that needed to be made. It was a great compliment coming from her. I had watched her raise 8 children on her own after my father left us, working 2 or 3 jobs at a time. I saw her repeatedly set aside her personal desires for love and affection. She was very proud that we all graduated from high school and not a one of us went to jail. According to Stevens, the Stevenses, my mother had great dignity and she was the ultimate butler for her children. Before I start reading the essay, I want to talk to you just a little bit about my mom because I feel like you'll see your mom, or maybe your grandma, or maybe even your wife in some of this discussion. My mom was born Mary Beth Graybill on December 2nd in 1927. In this picture, she's about 8 years old, and she's spending the day with her dad, working the fields. They picked cotton, they worked the animals together, and my mom loved spending time with her dad. Her relationship with her mom was very strained, and she was never able to really tell us why, and I don't know if it's because she really didn't know why, or maybe that she suppressed the pain of what that really meant to her. When she started high school, her mother sent her to live with her grandparents. In this picture of her in the middle, she's about 13 years old and she won a spelling bee. And about that same time, her mom decided that she needed to go live with her grandparents. This is her senior picture in high school. She was 16 years old when she graduated. She got to skip several grades in school because she was a very intelligent woman. She left for college at the University of Texas in Kingsville, and she cooked in the cafeteria to pay for her tuition. She met my dad not long after that and was married at 17. Like many women of the time, and even now, it happens, she dropped out of school to be a mother and a wife. My dad had been a medic for the Navy in the Korean War. Now, some of my sisters dispute this with me. I remember what my mother told me. But I do know that he was an alcoholic and that his alcoholism eventually cost him his wife and his family. My brother David was born in 1946 when she was 18 years old. Soon after, there's 4. My brother David, James, sisters Virginia and Kathy. Those were happier times. My dad worked at the railroad, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. But then, before too terribly long, there were 6, and then 8. Mom had just delivered my baby sister in this picture on the right over here where she's singing with me. When I asked her years later why she had so many children, she said that it was the only time that my dad didn't beat her. Now, I don't say that to cause empathy or pity or whatever, but this is the plight of a lot of women. And in those days, nobody talked about it. He wanted her pregnant and barefoot, and when she had to have a hysterectomy after child number 8, he was gone within 5 years. In this picture, several years later, my dad has already gone, and my 2 oldest brothers have graduated and gone as well. Mom was able to pay out a home without a loan or anything like that. A generous man in the neighborhood saw her plight and let us live in a house that he owned that was empty, and she paid him money every month towards purchasing the house. She worked as a seamstress and she made all of our clothes. Later, she got to do what she really loves, which was writing She wrote for the local newspaper. She was a photographer as well. As we got older and didn't need her attention as much at the night, in the evenings and at night, she took another job as a typesetter for a newspaper in a neighboring town. And then with a few more years, as we were growing older, she also took a newspaper route that she would run at 5 o'clock in the morning. My older brothers and sisters would sit in the back seat and roll the papers, and as you got older, you got to be in the front seat and throw them. And I was one of those that sat in the back seat and rolled the papers, and I eventually got to throw them. But still, the smell of newsprint makes me sick. So every year since 1977, we have spent together for Thanksgiving. Her one hope was that after she died, we would continue, and we have. So now I'm going to read from my essay. I want to say, let's see. This fall I took a course with Dr. Heller in which we focused on women writers. I wrote this paper, a portion of which I'm sharing with you now for that class, and this is the one she's referencing. As I read this essay, I hope you will see how these stories make me think of my mom and an everyday youth woman. Much attention is given to women who live remarkable and extraordinary lives, whether ultra successful or complete failure. However, much ignored are women who survive day to day under difficult circumstances, not drawing attention for either their extravagance or for their utter helplessness. 3 women authors who recognize this fact and have written about these truly powerful and important women are Eudora Welty, Tilly Olson, and Alice Walker. The women in these 3 stories live difficult lives, but none of them allows their circumstances to defeat them. They are self-confident. They are women who know what is truly important, even when society considers them insignificant and inferior. The story of Phoenix Jackson in A Worn Path is written by Eudora Welty. Welty is a white woman from Mississippi, born in 1909, writing about a black woman in the same state. In this story, as in her other works, Welty wrote of the deep complexity of the everyday. Phoenix is an elderly grandmother who makes the treks to town in order to secure medicine for her grandson so frequently that the path is worn. Her journey is a metaphor for the struggles of everyday life and the obstacles that a single parent, or in this case a grandparent, faces day in and day out. She is self-sacrificing and resilient. She goes out into the bright frozen day with no coat or gloves. The reader knows she's made the trek often because the path is worn and she has it memorized, but she never quits, complains, or makes excuses for not going. She accepts condescending remarks from white people without negative reactions because her grandson needs the medicine. And the only way she can get it is if she goes by herself and endures the insults. Let's see. I had to cut it way down. Eudora Welty champions the everyday woman living her everyday life. For all they do to help the next generation, women like Phoenix Jackson deserve celebration and our recognition. Tilly Olson, born in Nebraska in 1913 to poor Russian Jewish immigrants, writes about the triple life of mothering, housewifery, and working full-time in her short story, I Stand Here Ironing. A statement about her collection entitled Tell Me a Riddle, made by critic Irving Howe, exemplifies the position of this essay that everyday women living everyday lives aren't valued. In 1961, he remarked negatively that Olson relied upon her narrow experiences as a wife and mother, insinuating that housewives and mothers lead small, unimportant lives. Olson unapologetically told an audience that women who write must continue to voice the unvoiced, to pass on to our children the experience of our world, what we know and believe. The woman in Olson's I Stand Here Ironing lives that triple life that Olson spoke of. She's the keeper of the home and a mother, and she works outside the house. Like Olson, she has no time to catch her breath because of all the demands on her. Like women successfully living everyday lives, she is practical and pragmatic. She doesn't sugarcoat her situation, past or present. Like others of her mettle, she accepts that she can't do everything, that many things are away from her power, outside of her control. A very touching recollection she has is of being a young wife and mother, poor, but trying to do everything by the book. She had the best intentions, and when she found herself alone raising the child because her husband could no longer endure sharing want with her, she forged on. She made adjustments as they were necessary. It's a painful reality for women in this situation, but a truly strong woman is able to set aside emotions for herself and for her children when the situation calls for it. This mother knew that her daughter was suffering in childcare, but there was nothing she could do about it. She didn't give in to the pleadings from her daughter to stay home. A weaker woman would have buckled under the difficulties and disappointments. Olson's woman survives. For persisting in the face of poverty when many others quit, women like Olson's heroine in I Stand Here Ironing deserve celebration and recognition. Continuing the theme that women who live ordinary lives deserve celebration and recognition is Alice Walker, a Black Georgian born in 1944. Like Welty and Olson before her, Walker championed the everyday woman. She had an intense relationship with the theme of mystery and beauty of ordinary lives. Her story, Everyday Use, profiles a different kind of struggle, though, in that the heroine, Mama, is dealing with her daughter, Dee, who has left the everyday use world and has entered the superficial world of modern society. Mama's daughter, Dee, represents everything that Mama is not. The story is set in the 1960s or 70s when many children were casting off what their parents valued. Dee has bought into the society's concept of what is important, like money, expensive clothing, prestige, and pretension. Dee has cast off everything that Mama has given her. Mama is confused when Dee comes back to visit and now wants the old blankets that she rejected as old-fashioned and out of style when she went away to college. Quickly, though, Mama realizes that her pretentious daughter wants the hand-stitched blankets for display only. Dee is enraged when Mama tells her that the blankets are for her younger daughter, Maggie, and her future husband to use every day because they'll be ruined within a few years. Mama sees that Dee doesn't want to use the pieces or embrace their heritage. She only idealizes them as memorabilia, hollow signs of a heritage that have no connection with her real life. So she doesn't allow Dee to take them. Dee leaves angrily, and Mama and Maggie happily continue their lives, the lives that they live with the things that they use every day. For staying true to herself and her heritage, and for embracing her everyday use daughter and over her for display only one, Mama deserves celebration and our recognition. These stories are simple yet deep in their simplicity. Their heroines don't wear fancy clothes or live in fancy houses. On the contrary, the women struggle terrifically to mete out an existence for themselves and the children in their care. They face criticism from both outside the home and inside, but they remain true to themselves in a way that only strong, self-confident women can. The heroines don't care about recognition, but their authors do. These stories ensure that these women are celebrated and receive the recognition they deserve.
Moment or two for some comments, questions, praise, contradiction, controversy.
I think we do all recognize the mothers and grandmothers in their story.
Right. Right. You know, I think these women are more common, but maybe it is their commonalities that make them not worth mention. But that is the one thing that makes them worth celebrating. Without these women, where would we be? Where would I be? Without my mom, who never once complained about my dad, never once called him a bad name. It just is what it is. It just was what it was.
Right? That was
What?
her motto.
That was my mom's motto. It is what it is. It's my motto too. My husband's over there and he's saying, yep. So, I know we all appreciate our mothers and the sacrifices that they make for us.
Thank you so much. Position between your story and your mom.
Oh, it makes me cry. I didn't cry at her funeral, but I almost cried up there.
I know. But it is what it is, and you
Yes.
dealt with it.
Yes, ma'am.
That's right. For more than 25 years, Jennifer Coleman, professor of psychology, has mentored students in research in and out of the classroom. She has championed undergraduate research at WNMU as a founding member of WNMU Research Symposium, as the founder of Student Research and Professional Development Funding, and as the mentor to many students who have presented their work on the local, regional, and national stage. Women mentors have been integral to her research and work at every stage of her career, but a current project has brought her attention to women's roles in championing undergraduate research. Dr. Coleman has been at WNMU for 16 years, serving on the faculty and in several administrative capacities. She has been recognized as Professor of the Year most recently for her work championing student research.
While perhaps not as inspiring as the two talks we just listened to, I think I have an answer to Margaret about why she didn't get the doctoral degree. So that's good news. And I want to tell you a little bit about, in preparing for this day, I started to do a lot of reading, and to some extent the nature of my focus changed because I got sucked down the vortex of higher education and the data about women in higher education. So I've shifted a little bit of my focus, so bear with me. So Margaret's mother is really an amazing example of the trend that happened in higher education of women entering the academy and having to leave the academy. So a little bit of history for us to get started. The first women's colleges and the onset of co-education happened in the United States in around 1836, 1837. It's a long time ago. And the journey has been really erratic in that women were, this is classic, in the policy at Oberlin College, the first year that women were admitted, you know, women were let out of classes on Mondays, men had to go to school on Mondays and the women didn't have to. But do you know why? Because they had to launder the clothes of the male students. Yeah, exactly. I'd rather go to class. Even the worst class, I'd rather be at the worst class. So what happened in our country was, because education had been male exclusive, people did not know how to deal with women being on campus. It was a real threat to social standards of behavior and conduct, and you know, bad things could happen if you left men and women to learn side by side, right? We now know that, and we now accept that. What happened on many college campuses was women, in order to handle women, the male leadership started to create positions called deans of women. And they would hire a woman to serve in this capacity as a direct report to the president to handle the women, to isolate them as appropriate, to have them eating in their own cafeterias, to kind of navigate the men and women such that they overlapped and were together, intermingled as little as possible, basically. Sounds like a bad thing, but it actually was quite an amazing thing. It was the only way women could get into leadership positions in the academy. Most of the time they couldn't be hired to teach, but they were needed on college campuses. The moment female students were on college campuses, we needed female leaders on those same campuses. World War II comes, and many men are missing, right? They're off serving their country. So more women get hired to the academy. Great, right? So we've got this amazing accomplishment in the 1930s and 40s where we actually see leadership roles, faculty roles, starting to be saturated with women. And then World War II ends. Women accounted for 75% of all the job loss following World War II. And many of that job loss happened on college campuses. So those deans of women were no longer deans of women. The title was changed to Dean of Students, and the jobs were given to men. So we went through this post-war setback for women, where all of the leadership positions that women have been in are being vacated. Women are being pushed out because the job description changed and men are being hired into those positions. And we have yet to recover. In 2019, we have yet to recover. So keep in mind, the Dean of Student was the Dean of Women was a direct report to the President. We still are greatly lacking in women who are direct reports to presidents on college campuses. So let me lead you into some data now. So that's just a little history. Let's look now at where women stand in a couple different categories. So one of the arguments for women and why they're not in leadership positions, and I'm talking not just presidencies, provosts, I'm also talking about full tenured professors. There's a great dearth of women at that level of leadership. The myth is called the pipeline myth. The argument is, well, there just aren't enough women in the system, right? There might have been some truth to that 3 decades ago, but it's time to admit that that's no longer possible, and here's why. For the last 4 decades, that's a lot of time, since 1978, women account for more than 50% of all associate degrees. Since 1982, women account for more than 50% of all bachelor's degrees. Since 1987, more than 50% of all master's degrees. And since 2006, more than 50% of all doctoral degrees. So the pipeline is clogged with women. There's not a lack of women in the pipeline. If we look at rank, we see, even though women have higher educational attainment on average than men now, it's not reflected in the number of women at certain ranks, salaries, and positions of prestige. So in 2009, we had slightly more than 25% of all full professors as women. In 2015, 32%. So it's gone up, but it's still a third. That's not a lot. And again, it's not like it's only been a decade here. It's been many decades where we should be equalizing the playing field. Women also, on average, get higher loads of teaching, service, and advising. So one of the arguments for why they don't climb the ladder as much is because they're given workloads that inherently keep them in position. Let's talk tenure. If we look at tenure, in 2014, male faculty members held a higher percentage of tenure positions at every type of institution, but it's worse as the institution becomes more prestigious. Okay, so if you look at community colleges, it looks better than it looks at Research 1 institutions, where it looks by far the worst for women. And it is doubly or triply bad for women of color. Everything I'm saying is amplified when you look at women of color. If we look at pay, there's still a insane pay gap. I mean, really, as I looked at this, I thought, how is this even possible? So it's actually gotten worse, not better. In 1972, women were making 83% of men. In 2016, 82%. It's gotten worse, not better. Women faculty have the highest rate of childlessness than any profession. Let that sink in. The highest rate of childlessness of any profession in society are female faculty. The sacrifice is huge. That's why you didn't get a doctorate, so you could have a happy life. Presidencies. Oh, and by the way, there is one exception to the pay gap, and that's at two-year private schools, not public, where women make $32,000 and men make $30,000. So there, we're leading that kind of not very pretty picture, but we're leading. Presidencies. 2009, I'll just give you the percentages. 2009, less than 15%. 2011, 27%. 2014, 22%. 2016, 30%. Now, some of those, the institution that are included in the sample may be varying. Again, the statistic is the worst at the high research institutions where we see almost no female presidents. I'm at that age where I have reading glasses, you know what I mean? I'm sorry, that's really annoying. I'll be here for the next 40 years at this age. Presidents are less likely than male presidents to be married. So 90% of males are married, only 75% of women. Children, 89% of male presidents have children, only 74% of the females have children. Women are more likely to have altered their career for their family. 32% of women presidents report, I changed my trajectory, my career trajectory, because of my spouse, my children, or another significant dependent. Only 16% of men say that. So women is double. It's double. And that's, think about it, there are fewer women in the pool. So those women who have gotten into the pool have had to do a lot to be in that pool. The women who make it to the presidency have far better resumes. They have far better experience, and they tend to have higher qualifications, so they are more likely to have a doctoral degree, whereas the men don't need one. Chief academic officers, 40%, about 40%. So that's a place where women have managed to get, but they tend to stay there longer. So the female presidents tend to have been chief academic officers, female presidents, whereas male presidents weren't. Female chief academic officers tend to be CAOs prior to being a CAO, whereas men aren't. So the women seem to be spinning, they get to that level and then they stay there. They get recycled in that same position at multiple institutions and can't seem to rise out of it very easily. Boards. Our board of Regents is no different. Boards, men outnumber women on average 2 to 1. Another statistic that I found was about 30% of board members in the country. So of course that statistic is going to depend. Some boards are 20 people, some boards are only 5. So a little bit hard to nail those numbers down. So really, why does all of this matter? Well, it matters because there's other research that shows that gender agreement, gender concordance in mentoring relationships is particularly important for women. Women who have young female undergraduates who have female mentors tend to have higher research identities. They see themselves as scholars. They tend to be more productive. They publish more on average. They enmesh themselves. We were asking, how do you find a woman's voice as a poet? They find themselves in the identity of the career that they wish to pursue when they're mentored by women modeling that role for them. So if we have this deficiency of women at every level of the academy, we similarly have a deficiency of mentors in those positions. So I'm active right now in what's called the Council of Undergraduate Research. And this past summer I went to a conference and I met a woman who is extremely inspirational to me now. I seem to find them everywhere I go, which obviously says a lot probably about my need for seeing those models. And unlike Margaret, I have a mother, don't tell her, don't send her this recording, but I have a mother who I've never seen hold a book or read a book. And I teased her about that the last time I was with her. How do you have 2 daughters with PhDs and you never read? She said, I used to read. That's a pretty good impersonation of her. I used to read. What are you talking about? I said, I swear to God, in my entire life, I've never seen you pick up a book. And she said, well, I used to read. There was a period of time I was really into this one author. It was romance. They were romance novels, and I swear I still never saw her read a book. But so I met this woman, Nancy Hensel, who is currently president of a consortium of colleges, mostly in California, but throughout the country. I think there are 18 schools in the consortium. So she's risen to, she's leading presidents. So that's really quite an accomplishment for a woman in the academy, given the statistics I just quoted. And I saw her at this conference and I said, nobody's talking about mentoring students in online research. We have so many students now, and I'm gonna look into this as inspired by this talk today. My argument would be probably we're gonna see more women being educated through the online pipeline than men, because more women struggle with being housebound due to familial responsibilities. And if we're not in these online classes being models for them, mentoring them, and giving them the same opportunity that the student on the physical campus has, similar to how we don't have enough women in education, we're gonna lose another valuable commodity. We're gonna under-realize the potential that exists in that population. And we will all, men and women alike, be at a disadvantage without that pool in the group, right? So I just have the lack of diversity at the senior-most levels of higher education institution limits the success of individuals, institutions, and the sector as a whole. Many compelling arguments about the benefits of higher numbers of women in senior leadership roles have been presented. It is clear that advancing women in leadership roles is not something to be done solely to benefit women. It is in the best interest of institutions as well as society overall. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. I have a ton more.
Hi. I would love to have an opportunity to talk with you about the summer research stuff for undergrads.
Awesome.
Yeah. Where can I find you?
Right here.
Right here.
I meant to bring a bunch of bookmarks with me. You know, this is what women bring to the situation. So I made a bunch of handmade magnetic bookmarks. You know, it goes over the page of your book and it magnetizes to itself so it won't fall out of your book. Isn't that brilliant? I stole the idea. It's not my idea. But I made a bunch of these to hand out today and then I left them in my office, but you can have that one.
Thank you.
So I do the Student Research and Professional Development Funds. If anyone is enrolled in classes, should be taking advantage of that money. It's about a pool of $50,000 a year set aside for students to do research, to create something wonderful, you know, something artistic that they want to create on their own, that they might need money to, you know, get all those books and to get the metal, to, you know, and to get a drill to obviously drill holes in books. And don't do that. Don't drill more holes in books. Yeah.
It's for male students and female students.
It's for everybody. It's for part-time, it's for full-time. The only students who are excluded from that, honestly, are students who don't pay into the fees. So if you don't pay student fees, so the senior citizen who doesn't pay the student fee isn't eligible for to get that money. Because you have to have paid into it to borrow from it. You had a question, I think.
Yeah, I was just curious. What was the original plan that you then shifted into your current office?
So I wanted to just really do almost biographies of the women, Nancy Hensel, Beth Ambos, people who are leaders in the Council of Undergraduate Research. The Council of Undergraduate Research is a great example. In 3 decades, they went from having 20% female representation in the presidency position to 30% to 60%. So I see undergraduate research as a place, in fact, if we look at where women are doing well, women tend to be doing well at private liberal arts schools. They tend to be able to get into leadership positions in those institutions. It's the public research, doctoral granting, where women can't seem to be seen as equal in the playing field. But I wanted to kind of highlight that undergraduate research and how women have been really integral there. We all bring something different to the table, and it seems like women have really found a niche there where they find mentoring particularly rewarding. And you know, it could be so many of these women are childless. Mentoring is a place you get to have a generative relationship. As a psychologist, that word generative, it's that idea of you reach a certain point in your life and you really want to spend your time giving to other people and taking what you know and sharing it, not wielding it like it's a power tool, but just giving it away. And some women need students in order to find a place to do that. So, thank you so much.
Okay, so we're gonna take a break and then turn around and come back. I'm gonna change the venue here just a little bit because I can see that things are shaping up in a way that isn't be good. I'm gonna take myself off the docket today. Well, because we're gonna be here till 5 o'clock if I don't. Okay? People have a lot to say and there's a lot of questions and I think we should open it up and not do that. And believe me, it does break my heart. Right? I teach all week, So not to teach today is okay. I might make a few summary comments about where I would have gone, but I'm not going to take time. So that means that we can relax and spread out here a little bit. We don't have to be in a hurry, because I think that's a really good idea. So if they brought the food, I assume they did. You never know, Charmian, remember these things? Last things?
Yes.
Yeah, you just hope the food arrives.
Right.
If they brought the food, that's where we'll be, and if they didn't, well, then I'll have another problem to solve, which is okay anyway. So let's take a little break. And Oscar, you can ask the question that I didn't allow you to ask of Beata. I had to cut you off, but I knew you were good for it. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll look for it.
Okay. Let's see, do we have a crew? Just about. Everybody's coming back. All right. Charmian Russell has published a dozen books, translated into a dozen languages. She was awarded the John Burroughs Medal for Distinguished Nature Writing for Diary of a Citizen Scientist, which also won the Willa Award and was named by The Guardian as a top 10 nature book. Charmian has just finished writing Within Our Grasp, Feeding the World's Children for a Better and Greener Future, which combines her longtime interest in the environment with her longtime interest in hunger. She is also the author of the young adult novel Teresa of the New World and of the science fiction Knocking on Heaven's Door. She lives in the Gila. Oh, I didn't bring my, take a break. Second page. Didn't bring my second page. She lives in the Gila Valley of southwestern New Mexico and teaches part-time here for WNMU, where she's professor emerita, as well as at Antioch University in Los Angeles. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Okay, let me see. Let me do this too. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Just push it back in. There we go. Is this good? Okay. Let's see. Yay. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Slideshow. From beginning. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Hi. For most of my life, I write to inhabit my own life. I write in order to figure out what I'm thinking. I write in order to figure out what I'm feeling. I write to explore and clarify my relationship with the world. So when I write about Silver City or the members of the Gila Valley, I'm writing to deepen my connections to these places. And I'm writing to deepen the narrative that I tell myself about my life and myself. But I sometimes write to get out of myself, to get out of my place. And that happens mostly in fiction, where you can assume another, time and another person and another sex and another gender. But it also happens in nonfiction. So I was going to read a section from the book that Deborah mentioned, which is Within Our Grasp, Feeding the World's Children for a Better and Greener Future. Is this good? Is mic good? Okay. So this is about successful approaches to solving childhood malnutrition and stunting. And a quarter of the world's children are stunted due to a lack of nutrients in food. That's a big number. It's kind of a shocking number. A quarter of the world's children suffer from childhood malnutrition. Most of this is not in places of conflict or war. It's a chronic condition in relatively peaceful countries. A big part of childhood malnutrition, this global reality, is the empowerment of women or the disempowerment of women. And that's why the role of women is a big part of the book I just wrote. So, and I've noticed, none of us knew what the other one was reading, but I noticed there is this kind of theme, and I think that's telling. If there is a theme in what we're all saying today, I think it's meaningful, and I think it maybe reflects maybe how we're feeling today a little bit, in the country. So in this section that I'm going to read from, Fanny Chimbaya is a policewoman. She works in Lilongwe, Malawi, which is the capital. Lilongwe is the capital city. Malawi is a small country. It's considered by, it's often the world's poorest country based on gross domestic product. It's about 2/3 the size of New Mexico. Fanny's a professional woman. She doesn't make much money, so she bakes and sells bread as a way to bring in extra money. So I've been corresponding with her by email, and now we're going to meet for the first time, since she's invited me to visit her women's group. I also mentioned an organization in this section called Soils, Food, and Healthy Communities. Oh, let's see, I forgot to show some pictures. This is Fanny, and she's standing in front of her women's group, and you'll be hearing about her and talking. And this is the organization Soils, Food, and Healthy Communities. And these are all farmers in this picture, and they're working to become more prosperous as farmers. They're working to diversify their crops, to use drought-tolerant methods of farming, to use cover crops, and they're also doing a lot of community theater in which they not only talk about farming, but about family relationships. Because my book is about childhood malnutrition. That's my interest in writing this. And it doesn't really help if a household becomes more prosperous, if the women and children don't share in that prosperity. So the women need to have some control over how the money is spent. Another big problem that women farmers have, and again, these are women farmers and men farmers, is that they traditionally do half the farming, but they do all the child care and all the cooking. So especially when you don't have electricity or running water, this is a huge task. So these women are just exhausted. The pregnant women are exhausted, nursing moms are exhausted, women with small children are exhausted. So the community theater is about getting men to help share in the family tasks. And this is succeeding. I just have one more picture where we're all kind of standing around, and I'm standing around with them. This is succeeding. The men are responding, and lots of good things are happening. So another term in this short section is kwacha, and kwacha is the currency in Malawi. So visiting a women's microfinance group in Lilongwe, Malawi, and this is October 2016. Her women's group is called Tikodane, or Love One Another. They are 45 women who Fanny Chimbaya says are wounded in their hearts and who meet for a combination of microfinance and emotional support. Each member of Tikodane contributes 1,000 kwacha, or $1 a week. That money is lent to 3 women in the group who now each have about 15,000 kwacha, $15, for a big purchase. Perhaps enough to start a small business that will generate a little money, like baking bread, as Fanny does, or buying chickens and selling eggs. I am interested in what Fanny's friends will say about being a woman in Malawi. The government has just announced a new gender equality and women empowerment project to go with their official gender national policy. Gender equality is also a big theme on billboards and posters. But property rights in Malawi still favor men, while custom assumes that women have no need for property or education. Their role is to marry and have children. Gender violence is openly acknowledged. In 2007, a national study posed the question, do women sometimes deserve to be beaten? 30% of males and 39% of females said yes. In a 2010 survey, 1 in 4 women in Malawi answered yes to having been beaten, and 1 in 4 to having been raped. For context, in a large national survey in America on domestic violence, 1 in 4 women also said they had been beaten by an intimate partner. A woman is assaulted in America every 9 seconds. On the outskirts of town, Fanny's house is in a neighborhood of small houses and shops made of mud brick and cement block on dirt streets that dead end in the dust and noise of new construction. In the 100 homes she considers her community, 4 have running water. Most people buy their water from a government kiosk, traditionally a woman's job squeezed in during the night when the rest of the family sleeps. My taxi driver and I turn right and left and wrong and stop to ask 3 people before we find the small grocery store that Fanny mentioned in her email. Then Fanny is out in the dirt street and giving me a hug. Some people are just exuberant, warm, making instant friends. I know other men and women like Fanny who are wired this way, perhaps the best kind of way, and this familiarity is enormously relaxing. I am hustled into her house, where the living room is perhaps 10 by 10 feet. The chairs and couches are in a square so that 8 of us face each other, a wooden table in the middle with 4 or 5 other women coming in to sit on the floor. A dozen children mostly stay outside on the cement patio. Each woman is introduced and we shake hands because this is a handshaking culture with everyone all the time. Immediately, I see that the women are grumpy. They don't smile or signal telepathically that they want to be instant friends. They don't know what to say to me, and most of them don't speak or understand English very well. Fanny urges them to talk about themselves, tell their story, and they're quiet. What presumption? Tell your story. One of the women is pregnant and looks desperately tired. Except for Fanny, who is moving around, getting out the banana bread she baked last night, slicing the bread, urging people to eat, gesturing at someone to tell her story. All the other women look tired too. Some in particular look depressed. Later I will think they have good reason to be depressed. Mrs. Misonzi Miwanda is a widow with 2 boys and 2 girls. She is HIV positive, with 1 son also born positive. 3 of her children are in high school, but they may have to leave soon because she can't afford the fees. She used to have a business selling secondhand clothes, but as the Kwacha keeps devaluing, any business with such marginal returns is just impossible. It's just impossible to buy the clothes now. Mrs. Lingalinane Banto's husband left her and their 6 children to marry another woman and raise another family. Polygamy is illegal in Malawi, but no one enforces that law. No one requires a man to support his children. Mrs. Banto's husband used to beat her for coming to this woman's group, and so his absence is not necessarily bad. But she does feel badly for her oldest daughter, who is only 12, and who has to miss so much school to take care of the younger children, especially the 2-year-old twins. Mrs. Talendali Ali is another widow who is HIV positive with 3 children. She earns her living raising and selling poultry, chickens, doves, ducks, pigeons, a wealth, a glory of birds. Fortunately, most of these women own their homes and live in the capital city of Lilongwe, where they have easier access to water and electricity, even if electricity, like water, is only in a few homes and goes out annoyingly, regularly, during much of the day. Fanny, for example, had to bake her banana bread late last night because that's when the power came back on. She rolls her eyes and raises her hands. What can she do? There's nothing to do about it. Fortunately, these women have access to the creative commerce of urban life. They can make, they can bake, they can sell, they can hustle and bustle, if they have the energy. Living in Lilongwe also means these women more easily get the free antiretroviral drugs for people with HIV, a program partially funded by USAID. In Malawi, almost 13% of adult women are HIV positive compared to 8% of adult men. The disparity is even stronger in teenagers, with 3.7% of girls ages 15 to 17 living with HIV, compared to 0.4% of boys. This is likely linked to sexual violence against girls and early marriages. Interviewing the Love One Another group takes time. I ask questions. Fanny urges someone to answer. Fanny or Mrs. Mwinda translates from Chechewa, while more women come in and out, sit on the floor, and then leave. I try to ingratiate myself by talking about my own women's group. We also come together to talk about our problems, I say, thinking of friends with ill health, friends with parents dying or with dementia, friends with children struggling to find their way as young adults. Mrs. Talia Ndali Ali is moved to put her hand on my leg. Fanny translates. Like if you're diagnosed with Kachilomba Kaetsky. Literally, this means the beast of AIDS. No, I think. No one in my women's group worries that she will be diagnosed with the beast of AIDS. But yes, I say, yes, problems like that. I am here in part to donate to the group, to join the group with a donation as they do. And when I take out 15,000 kwacha from my purse, they all admittedly become friendlier and livelier. They ululate as Mrs. Winda counts the money, and then we go outside for some singing, dancing, and clapping. I explain not for the first time that I can't ululate. Literally, I have a mild case of being tongue-tied, in which a band of tissue tethers the bottom of my tongue to the roof of my mouth. I demonstrate. They laugh. Inside again, I try to further please by mentioning that my husband does all the cooking in my house. This would have gone over very well as soils food in healthy communities, but these ladies are shocked. Oh, Mrs. Moinda says with great emphasis, American women are so lazy. Wait, I protest. I work too. I go out and make money. My husband should help. Yes, Fanny chimes in as the main breadwinner of the family. That's part of being equal. That's what should happen. We've come to some disagreement here, but it's mixed up with general merriment and a sense of closure. My taxi driver is waiting to take me, Fanny, and her husband to a restaurant for an early dinner. Soon the sky outside will redden in a classic equatorial fast sunset diffused with dust. No one wants to be driving in the long way at night, partly because of crime, but mainly because there are so few streetlights. First, before I go, I need to take a photo of us all together. Tikodane, love one another. And then I just want to show you, well, here we are taking a few more photos. And this is the video that I want to do. So let me see how let's see. Okay, can you turn up that sound? So this is when they're all dancing. I'm taking a video. All outside, we're ululating, getting it on. I'd be dancing too when I'm taking the video. Now Fanny's going to come in. She's going to end it. She has a great smile ending it. She's shaking it up too a little bit. Look at that smile. All right. I don't know how to get out of this either. Okay.
Questions, comments, controversies, Oscar?
How was the banana bread?
I probably was too nervous to really focus on the banana bread, but pretty good. I'm sure that she bakes it, sells it.
How did you come to be with these women?
Fanny's on Facebook.
Oh,
Remember,
wow.
Fanny's a professional. She's a policewoman, and she works with Child Protective Services. A lot of people in Africa go get their education, and it's a lot of growing middle class, growing educated. Fanny went to Edinburgh for a year to get part of her MA, and goes on Facebook as a way to keep connected to the world.
She's fluent in English.
Yeah. Yes. English is a second language in Malawi. Chichewa and English combined. Children learn English in the schools.
So you just wrote to her?
I just wrote to her. Yeah. I saw her mentioned in a clipping, a newspaper, and I said, so I just contacted her. We still write. She's still my Facebook friend.
You're still in contact.
Yes, right. And yes, exactly. She's excited to be in the book, which won't come out till 2020.
More comments and questions. Okay, so I have one. So why Africa?
One of my goals in this was to show that solving childhood malnutrition is an environmental problem. That as an environmentalist, I just heard too many of my friends saying, well, I'm concerned about that, I really feel bad, but isn't overpopulation no, you've got it wrong. I mean, child death and child malnutrition is what leads to having larger families. When women are educated, when women feel that their families are going to thrive, when women feel that, they have fewer families, fewer children. Fanny has 2. And she's going to get those 2 daughters through high school, through university, and that's her goal. So Africa is a good place to talk about because Africa is the place in the world where we still do have population growth. The rest of the world, we have declining population. Globally, we have almost reached replacement rate. But Africa not, and that's because Africa is still the place where we have such extreme poverty, where we have families who children are dying, children are becoming stunted. So it was just the place, and Malawi was a place where they have a lot of successful programs. They've reduced a lot of their childhood malnutrition, and I'll make a pitch saying, USAID was doing a great job there under the former administration. So there's a real point to having good foreign policy. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to have another speaker, and then I'll make some comments about the topic that's of interest to me today, but I won't give a full spiel because I don't want to spend our time too much, but the food arrived. Somebody must have made a cell phone call, I don't know. But anyway, the apparent problem was that the table that they expected was not set up the way they expected it. So these things happen. So we'll have our snacks after everything's said and done. How's that? Makes sense, right? All right.
Yeah, I didn't want to, I wasn't ready to turn that off, so maybe.
Oh, the mouse disappeared. That's why.
Oh, it's off the side.
Escape?
Escape.
Oh, I can just do that right here, right?
Yeah. Top right.
There's no top right. Top left. Uh-oh, it's gonna backtrack me. That's okay though. Let's just do this. How's it? Let's do that. Okay? Annalise Kavami is an English language arts teacher at Lordsburg High School, a sponsor for the local National Honor Society chapter, and the local school liaison for the New Mexico Teacher Leader Network. She holds degrees from Brigham Young University in physics and math education, and she is currently enrolled in the WNMU Master of Arts Interdisciplinary Studies program, focusing on literature and writing. Annalise is descended from the Utah pioneers. She served a church mission in Osaka, Japan, and she is the president of the Relief Society in the Rodeo branch of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She lives in the Boot Heel of New Mexico with her husband and the youngest of her 5 daughters, and she drove all this way today to give this presentation, and I want to thank her and her husband and daughter for that. Thank you. Okay.
Oh. Thank you, Dr. Heller. I'd like to really say how much I appreciate this opportunity. Where's the right button, guys? Slideshow, right?
Slideshow, right. From beginning.
There it is. Different version than I'm used to. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to be talking about some of the women whose legacy I carry, whose example and whose examples have paved the way for me to become the person that I am. In 1897, a 45-year-old member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Elizabeth McCune, made a trip from Utah to England to see her son, who was serving a mission for the church. The missionaries were having difficulties, in part because a man named William Jarman traveled the area promoting an anti-Mormon book he had published. Among his scandalous assertions was the claim that Latter-day Saint women were little more than slaves. He claimed that these women were confined behind a wall in Utah, held ignorant and in degrading conditions. This kind of slanderous misinformation had spread widely throughout England, even before Jarman, and it was difficult for the male missionaries in England to refute these assertions. That was about to change. One day, while Elizabeth McCune was attending an LDS church meeting in England, her heart pounded with surprise as she heard the words of the man addressing the congregation and realized he was speaking about her. We have with us just now a lady from Utah who has traveled all over Europe with her husband and family, and hearing of our conference, she has met with us. We are going to ask Sister McCune to speak this evening and tell you of her experience in Utah. As word spread that she would be speaking, the hall filled up. Extra chairs had to be brought in, and a crowd gathered. With a final prayer, she recalled, I rose to address the audience. I told them I had been raised in Utah and knew almost every foot of the country and most of the people. I spoke of my extensive travels in America and in Europe, and said that nowhere had I found women held in such esteem as among the Mormons of Utah. Elizabeth continued with conviction. Our husbands are proud of their wives and daughters. They do not consider that they were created solely to wash dishes and tend babies, but they give them every opportunity to attend meetings and lectures and take up everything which will educate and develop them. Our religion teaches us that the wife stands shoulder to shoulder with the husband. Sister McCune was speaking with almost 70 years of history to back her up. Even in the early years of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, women enjoyed significant roles in religious teaching and observance, in pioneering in education, and even in civic voice. Wallace Stegner, a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, writing about these 19th century Latter-day Saint women, said it succinctly. Their women were incredible. These incredible women of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were blessed to live in a time and place where the conditions under which they lived and the attitudes of those around them fostered a level of equality not experienced by most 19th century American women. From the beginning, the attitudes of Latter-day Saint leaders recognized the qualities women had and the contributions they could make. This started with the first president of the church, Joseph Smith Jr., and his wife, Emma Hale Smith. Emma was quite educated, and he greatly valued her capabilities and viewed her as an equal partner. In a time when many women were looked upon as second-class citizens for whom it was unacceptable to speak out in meetings, Emma was already being raised to the status of a teacher within the church. It was she who organized the first hymn book for use in meetings, and she was the first president of the LDS Church's women's organization. After Joseph's death, Brigham Young became the next leader of the church. He also believed in the capacity of women to achieve great things and their right to strive for them. In a speech in 1869, he told the church, "We have sisters here who, if they had the privilege of studying, would make just as good mathematicians or accountants as any man, and we think they ought to have the privilege to study these branches of knowledge that they may develop the powers with which they are endowed. We believe that women are useful not only to sweep houses, wash dishes, make beds, and raise babies, but that they should stand behind the counter, study law or physics, or become good bookkeepers and be able to do the business in any counting house, and all this to enlarge their sphere of usefulness for the benefit of society at large." In addition to the attitudes of church leaders, the adventurous and entrepreneurial spirit of Western settlers, along with the endless promises the West offered, conspired to soften the social and legal restrictions on women dominant in Eastern society. Latter-day Saint women in Utah had to be leaders within their families and their communities because many of them had husbands serving abroad as missionaries or working in other locations, forcing these women to function as the heads of their households, farms, and businesses. As a result, the laws of Utah Territory granted more rights and privileges than were allowed to women in many other parts of the United States. It must be mentioned that the practice of polygamy, despite the contentions of those who worked very hard to rescue the Latter-day Saint women from it, contributed to this condition, as many of these laws were created with the intent to protect the rights of plural wives. Among these laws were the divorce laws, which were very progressive, particularly when the wife requested the divorce. While many states allowed divorce on grounds such as adultery, abuse, and so forth, Utah permitted a kind of no-fault divorce based on the premise that the husband and wife simply did not get along. This meant that any woman who entered into a marriage and when they found it was not to her liking, had easy access to a way out. My great-great-grandmother, Mary Powell Sabin, relates that her mother, Sarah Elizabeth Powell, ended up being a beneficiary of these laws when she remarried to a Mr. Butler, who unfortunately, as her daughter relates, in character and behavior, proved to be unworthy of her. She divorced him, winning custody of her 2 children who had been born in the course of their short marriage. This would not have been the outcome in most other states and territories at the time. Similarly, laws relating to women's property ownership and inheritance were very progressive compared to the rest of the United States. Within these prevailing societal attitudes and legal protections, the Latter-day Saint women began to take hold of the opportunities available to them and prove their abilities to lead and to achieve. Their accomplishments began even before their migration to Utah. Their efforts enriched not only themselves but others and continue to be felt today. One of the earliest and greatest accomplishments of Latter-day Saint women had its start in March of 1842. In Nauvoo, Illinois, the Female Relief Society of Nauvoo, later shortened to the Relief Society, was organized with Emma Smith as its first president. What started as a group of 20 women dedicated to relieve the poor and save souls grew to over 1,100 women in the first 5 months, and today includes over 7.1 million women in 170 countries, one of the largest women-led organizations of its kind. Once in Utah, women had opportunities to gain education and work in a variety of professions. Elizabeth Kane, a non-member, visited Utah in 1872 with her husband, writing an account of her trip along the way. She noted, "They close no career on a woman in Utah by which she can earn a living." Brigham Young once stated that if he had to choose between educating his daughters and his sons, he would educate his daughters because they were the ones who would educate their families. LDS women especially revered and encouraged education for themselves. As a matter of fact, the very first item printed on the first edition of the First Relief Society publication, The Women's Exponent, in June 1872, indicates their intense interest in education for women.
No, I'm nodding.
Okay. I was trying to make sure you weren't trying to give me any heads up. Okay.
No, I give you the big sign if there was.
Okay, thank you.
You're good.
All right. The year after this was published, in 1873, Latter-day Saint women began going east with the express intention of becoming doctors. Life on the frontier was fraught with danger, particularly for childbearing women and young children. There was a need for women medical professionals, both to provide health services and to teach women how to better care for their families. The first to go was Romania Pratt. She and her husband sold important family possessions, including a family home, then left their children with her parents and headed east to the Women's Medical College of Philadelphia. Despite their sacrifices, they ran out of money, but the Relief Society raised funds so she could complete her education. She returned to Utah and opened her own practice, earning the respect of her male colleagues. Ellis Reynolds Shipp also headed east at great sacrifice to study medicine in Philadelphia. As the first wife in a polygamous family, she left her children in the care of her sister wives as she went east. She was challenged in her endeavors by financial difficulties and by the birth of a daughter in the middle of her courses of study, but she persevered. After receiving her Doctor of Medicine degree, she returned to Utah, where she moved her family into a house near her office. She soon recognized that the number of women medical professionals in Utah was still insufficient for the needs of the population. So in 1879, she founded the School of Nursing and Obstetrics in Salt Lake City, which eventually trained over 500 women as licensed midwives. Recognizing the need for access to higher education in Utah, thus allowing students to attend closer to home, Latter-day Saints made it a priority to found such institutions, and women were included from the start. When Brigham Young Academy was opened in October 1875, it was emphatically coeducational. The first board of trustees included not only 6 men, but also a woman, Martha Jane Corey, who represented the interests of the women. And almost 34% of the students in that early coeducational academy were women. That academy would eventually become Brigham Young University, from which my mother, 6 of my sisters, and I received our bachelor's degrees. One of the most interesting sagas in the journey for equality for women in that area was women's suffrage. In this, as in many of the other rights women held in the area, the practice of plural marriage played a major role. In the face of widespread criticism from people in the eastern states concerning plural marriage, Latter-day Saints in Utah wanted to show that women were not held in subjection or slavery as they were frequently portrayed. So in February 1870, Governor Mann signed into law women's suffrage in Utah Territory. Interestingly enough, while the territory of Wyoming had been the first to grant women's suffrage, the elections of Utah were held before those of Wyoming, making the women of Utah 5 times as many women as were in Wyoming, the pioneer women voters of the United States. Emmeline B. Wells, an LDS woman and Utah pioneer who was a happily married plural wife, was very outspoken on the subject of opportunity and rights for women. Her diary reflects a resolve early in her life to elevate the condition of my own people, especially women. She was barely 5 feet tall and less than 100 pounds, but that fragile exterior disguised her extraordinary intelligence and her drive to get things done. In her role as an editor of the Women's Exponent, she became well known in Latter-day Saint circles. As a writer submitting pieces to publications in the East, she became known to national suffragists. She was one of 2 women from Utah selected to attend the 1879 meeting of the National Woman Suffrage Association held in Washington, D.C., and it was there that she met Susan B. Anthony, the start of a 30-year friendship. Emmeline B. Wells, in a correspondence with Susan B. Anthony, pointed out that in Utah, among the Latter-day Saints, every office open to women she has been allowed to occupy, including membership on nominating committees. As delegates to county and territorial conventions, women have always been most politely treated, invited to speak, and express opinion. Unfortunately for the women of Utah, the non-member opposition to plural marriage was so great that an anti-polygamy society was formed, one goal of which was to disenfranchise LDS women voters, believing that they only voted in accordance with their husbands' wishes. They found allies in the United States Congress, where their efforts culminated in the Edmunds-Tucker Act of 1887. One provision in this act explicitly states that it shall not be lawful for any female to vote at any election hereafter held in the territory of Utah, and every act of the Legislative Assembly of the Territory of Utah providing for or allowing the registration or voting by females is hereby annulled. Thus, the women of Utah Territory were disenfranchised by an act of Congress. Having once had the privilege of voting, women such as Emmeline B. Wells could not be satisfied without it. She and other women formed the Women's Suffrage Association of Utah, dedicated to returning the vote to women. Through this association and the Relief Society, women studied lessons in government, law, history, and other subjects which enabled them to be active and effective in public affairs. Their efforts led directly to women's suffrage being written into the Constitution of Utah as it gained statehood in 1896. The following year, Martha Hughes Cannon was elected as the first female state senator in the United States. After this victory in Utah, Emmeline Wells continued to work toward the enfranchisement of women throughout the United States, becoming a leader in the National Council of Women and developing many friends and connections among leaders in the United States and internationally. And back to Elizabeth McCune. Although she did not view herself as a skilled public speaker, she addressed groups of interested people in England, demonstrating by her very presence the truth of the equal status of the Latter-day Saint women. She did not know it, but she was pioneering the Sister Missionary Program, which began the following year. This program now includes over 22,000 women sent to minister worldwide. Roughly 100 years after Sister McCune's talks, I was called as a sister missionary to Japan, with the great privilege of acting as a minister and a representative of the church among the people of that nation. I appreciate the legacy which she and other women pioneers in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have passed on to me and to my 5 daughters, each of whom is working toward higher education and learning to be a leader in her community. Surely, in pioneering equality in the Old West, Emma Smith, Grandma Powell, Romania Pratt, Ellis Shipp, Emmeline B. Wells, and others could not have imagined the impact they would have on women today. Thank you.
Questions, comments, controversy, Oscar?
Osaka.
Sorry.
Yep. Second largest city.
I have a question about what you think the source of the bias against polygamy is. Where's this coming from?
Well, a lot of Christian groups at the time felt that polygamy was immoral. They didn't realize, of course, that that these women who were entering into plural marriages, obviously they had a way out if they wanted to because they had the divorce laws, but they were entering into that for their own benefit. A lot of these women were unaccompanied immigrants from Europe or women who had lost their husbands on the trail west. It helped provide for some security. But there was that bias, and these people felt, they just felt it was really, really immoral, and they were going to fight against it. In fact, as I recall correctly, when the Republican Party first started, they had two things they wanted to get rid of: slavery and polygamy. So,
Yeah, they had those yoked together.
yep.
As if they were equivalent things somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that was highly interesting to see the kind of feminist spirit involved
Oh, yeah.
in the Trek West and the
Mhm.
organization of the church too. So what about leadership in the Church of Latter-day Saints today? My recollection of this from my own childhood, which was Mormon, was intensely masculine. Is that the case today, or are there women in leadership positions?
Well, we have certain groups which are fulfilled by the priesthood holders, and those are the men, but we have certain organizations which are fulfilled by the women. The Relief Society, the Young Women's Organization, the Primary. As a matter of fact, LDS Charities is also run by a counselor in the Relief Society currently, Sharon Eubank. She's a fabulous woman. So the thing that people don't realize is that they all sit in council together. So the men and the women work together in council to come up with things at the highest levels of leadership. Mhm. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Oh, Church Executive Council.
Yep, Church Executive Council. Thank you for reminding me of the name. So,
Thank you.
okay.
I get the great pleasure to introduce Dr. Heller to you. Dr. Debbie Heller, professor of English, has been teaching at Western New Mexico University since 1992. Her special interests include Shakespeare, ancient literature, the Enlightenment, and women's writing. She teaches undergrads and grad courses focused on drama, novels, poetry, and anything else she thinks will excite students. Dr. Heller has been the recipient of WNMU's Excellence in Teaching Award, and she has twice earned the award for Excellence in Research. She was granted a Mellon Fellowship in 2005 to study at the Huntington Library in California, where she first discovered the materials she will talk about today. She has published many scholarly works since coming to WNMU, including her recent book, Blue Stockings Now, The Evolution of a Social Role. Dr. Heller.
All right, so 5 days ago, I wrote a long paper. And then I realized that this wasn't going to work. And I'm really glad that I had that insight because I boiled it down to one page. So I'm going to go through my one-page boil down, and then you can ask me questions, and we're going to make it as interactive as possible. All right, so my interest today, my primary scholarly interest today, still grows out of the research I did at the Huntington Library in California in the early 2000s, where I read, over the course of 4 or 5 months, 7,000 manuscript letters written between women in the 18th century. And these were personal letters exchanged between networks of 30 to 40 women writing about their educational aspirations, their publications, they were actually publishing at that time, their friendships, their illnesses, the onset of Alzheimer's disease in the case of one person. So it was an entire immersion experience in the way women were living in England between about 1740 and 1795. And it was a time capsule experience, and it was just absolutely, it changed my life in the way I thought about history, literature, women, and particularly gave me a whole new level of respect for the past, which is something I think people lack today. It really, really troubles me, especially when I work with younger students.
when they make a kind of intuitive or impulsive divide between the right, enlightened, cool ways we do things now and how terrible things have been in the past. And my friends in the audience know that this is something that I'm intensely interested in. I think we need to reverence the past and remember that we wouldn't be here today with anything if it hadn't been for the people here before us, of course. But that's really not where I want to go right now. What I want to talk about right now is friendship. And I'm intensely interested in friendship between women. Jessica Enriquez in the audience told me a little while ago that I should teach a class on women and friendship, which got me thinking about how that would be a really cool idea. But I just want to give you some ideas about how friendship has been thought about in the past and whether we might want to resurrect some of those values, those older friendship values for ourselves today. So, what do we think about? Let me just ask you this question. What do we think about? What do we implicitly assume friendship means today? Some of those answers might be the sharing of private thoughts. Women value their friends so they can share private thoughts. I do that. Shared pleasures. You go out and play tennis together, or hike, or bake banana bread, or get into groups, community groups, and work out problems, right? Supporting each other in difficulties, and also feeling deep affection. All those things, right? Well, that was also true in the 18th century. Intensely true. It's probably been true for a long, long time, and not only in the West. Now, what do we assume the basis of friendship is? This gets more interesting. What do we assume the soil or growth medium for friendship is? And again, I want to focus just today on friendship between women. Do we think that it is mainly emotional? Women being emotional creatures, we get together, we feel emotions, and we complain about our difficulties, or we cry together. Is it mainly emotional? If we say it is, I think we're robbing ourselves of some of the foundational, strong, important things that friendship has been between women. So let me take a little trip back outside of the 18th century, even back to ancient Greece. It's my contention from what I've studied in 18th century women that the kind of friendship these women, and I'm talking about an educated group of 30 or 40 women, they didn't go to college obviously, but they were well read, they read a lot of literature, they knew their Shakespeare, they knew their Bible, they were all Christian women. Where do we think they got their ideas for the kind of friendship they valued most intensely? Well, the answer to that, strangely enough, is they got their essential value for friendship out of ancient Greece, and particularly from Aristotle. They didn't know this. They didn't know that they were deriving their definition of friendship from Aristotle, but they were, because Aristotle wrote a major treatise that came down, saturated literature and philosophy through history, and came down to them in the 18th century. And that treatise distinguished between three kinds of friendship. There was pleasure friendship, everybody knows what that is, and mostly young people intensely know what that is. That's where you go out and have a good time together, doing whatever it is you want to do that gives you a good time. There was pleasure friendship, then there was utility friendship, which seems to dominate friendships in the modern moment. And that is, you're friends with people who can do stuff for you. At the workplace, in your neighborhood, at the grocery store, and well, we have a whole new mode of friendship now called friending on Facebook, but I'm not going to touch that. All right. But then there was another kind of friendship that Aristotle said was all important and really the only one deserving the name of friendship, and he called it virtue friendship. Now, as soon as you bring that word up among people today, particularly my students, and you say the word virtue, people get very nervous because it sounds awfully prim, doesn't it? Yes, and it has those gendered connotations about being tightly corseted and prim. That's not what he meant. He meant the kind of friendship that grows out of good character. And he said the only kind of friendships worth really developing in life are friendships with somebody who you understand to be your second self. You find somebody who believes what you believe, wants the same things you want, wants to get those things the way you want to get them. And the person who has set up a life ideal for himself or herself that is based on character and those kinds of higher level ambitions. It was really interesting for me to find out that the women that I was studying at the Huntington Library and whose letters I was reading and whose publications I was reading were, without even knowing it, completely identified with this highest level of friendship.
All right, now I'm going to give you a picture of what some of these women look like, just real quick. All right. These are 4 women that I paid most attention to. Mary Pendarvis Delaney, Elizabeth Robinson Montague, and Elizabeth Carter. If I had more time and things had worked out a little differently, I would tell you a long story about the friendship, the virtue friendship, the very serious friendship between those 2 women. But I'm gonna cut around that and just give you a few quotations from them and try to sketch the picture myself. I want to tell you a little bit about this woman, Mary Pendarvis Delaney, and those are her dates. She married twice. Her first marriage, and I know we're not talking yet about friendship, but marriages and friendship are tightly related, so let me just spin this out a little bit. She married twice. Her first marriage was an arranged marriage when she was 15 years old. She was married to a 54-year-old man against her will. It lasted for 17 years. Then she was released from that. When she married again, when she was in her 40s, she decided, and she told her friends this. These are the 2 friends she's corresponding with. She told her friend, I'm about to get married to somebody I know my brother's not going to have any use for at all. Her parents were dead by that time. My brother's probably going to disown me, but I've chosen to marry this man who was much less socially elevated than she was, and I'm going to marry him because we can be friends instead of marital partners. And it's going to be a friendship of equality. It's going to be a virtue friendship. And she did that. And she said, here's what I look for in a friend or a husband. This, again, is going to sound very prim, but I think it's rooted in a soil of richness that we could use today in our own friendships. She says, when I look for a friend, and in saying that, when I look for a husband, I'm searching for somebody who has sanctity of manners and inward worth as well as outward accomplishments, who has the freedom and agreeableness of conversation that would make them liked by about everybody, but they are not so much in awe of the world as to not take every opportunity of recommending virtue and reproving vice. These are very serious women. It sounds like a Latter-day Saint woman, doesn't it? I mean, the connections here are very deep because they're growing out of Christian soil too. But these women were taking friendship extremely seriously, and they were building friendships that happened to last their entire life. So these 3 women met when they were all in their 30s, and their best friend type of friendship lasted all the way until their deaths. Even though they didn't see each other, they were writing letters. This is before telephone calls. This is before any kind of email. This is where you had to sit down 3 days a week and spend an hour and a half writing a letter to somebody, and you just kept doing that, even though you didn't have face-to-face contact, because you were so intensely devoted to the type of person that person was. So then you have to ask yourself, how much do we value that kind of lifelong friendship today? And do other kinds of friendship today, have they replaced that kind of friendship? So we now have thinner friendships, more ephemeral friendships. Friendships that we have in the workplace, and then when we change jobs, as most of us do, they disappear, and we have to get new friendships. Or is it possible to have those friendships anymore? Is it possible to have those kinds of loyalties between women anymore? So back to my boil down page. I guess I'm going to ask you some questions at the end for you to think about. Get to page 7. Yeah. Do we live lives today that even permit us to have the kind of friendship I'm talking about here? Or do we live in a time when it's no longer possible, we ought to be able to just give it up and have more ephemeral, more changing friendships? Can we have these kinds of friendships between men and women today? Can we have these kinds of friendships in marriage? What is the relationship between religious faith and friendship? One question might be, and I have a feeling that it's going to again sound terribly prim for me even to pose it, is it possible to have true friendship if you're not a religious believer of some kind? Is it possible? I'm not talking Christian. I'm talking
like any kind, do you have to have some kind of religious foundation to be a true friend with another human being? I see somebody shaking her head, no way. That doesn't sound right, does it? So let's open this question up, because seems to be one that would generate some interest. How come you think it's possible to be a true friend of somebody without having any religious interest?
It's just like human, it's just a natural thing, I guess, to have a friendship without it being based on like religion.
You think it comes naturally to people just being human creatures? They don't need to be trained up in a belief
Well,
system?
in order for it to be a true friendship, yes, and I don't know, I guess if you start basing it on religion,
It is a difficult question once you start thinking about it, isn't it? Because I watched your mind kind of say, well, wait a minute here. Maybe it would be difficult. It might be easy to have a pleasure friendship if you have no faith whatsoever. You just go out and play tennis or drink some beer and have a good time. And it might be easy to have a utility friendship because you say, I need you and you need me and we'll do a quid pro quo deal together, right? But what about if you had one of these virtue friendships and I say to you, and we could be males, females, females, males, whatever. I say to you, I want you to be the best person you can possibly be, and you want me to be the best person I can possibly be. So let's bond together and have one of these friendships and we're going to grow each other. I'm going to grow Oscar and Oscar's going to grow Debbie. Without a religious foundation, and I didn't say Christian, can you do that? What's your ethical basis?
So Aristotle
Yeah, okay.
was the basis of this, and that was the basis was just constant improvement of not allowing, like you said, vices to be overtaking the friend.
Constant improvement of character.
Yeah,
Becoming a better and better and better and better person.
And similarly, Aristotle believed that you had to be trained. You were not innately a good person. You were not.
That's correct.
We were just blank canvases that have the ability to be good.
That's correct. You have to be trained to be good.
Yeah.
So
in your line of some form of believing in Godhood or religion
would help.
It would help, and it would lead to where most of these occurrences do come up is through religious activity and being trained like that. But I think it can be done even without religious influences.
And so if you took the religious away, and we got another question coming, if you took the religious influence away, what would substitute?
Just good moral fiber.
Where does that come from?
Parents.
And where do they get it?
It's built up. I mean, I guess if we're talking about void of all religious activity ever, but you said that we have to at least experience something from the past.
Well, virtue's got to grow somewhere, and if it's not religion, I'm just saying, and I'm open, okay? But I like to fight too, you know that. yeah, you do too. But I'm just saying, if you're not going to get it from religion, you're going to have to get it somewhere. Just a second, Jenny. Yeah, go ahead.
Morality plays a big part in valued friendships.
Yes.
That is the big root of it all.
And where are you going to get it? Where can you get your morality? You
Morality comes from belief.
Yeah, what kind?
It really depends on the belief. Like, an atheist could learn from their parents that following the law is good, or follow what you think is right.
Yeah. And the parents, where did they get it?
They got it from whoever influenced them.
Yeah.
And their ancestors got it from whoever influenced them.
Yeah. We're talking about a long network here, aren't we? Deep, a lot of roots. Riley, go.
What about other disciplined areas?
Okay, you're going to have to speak a little louder.
What about other disciplined areas like educational institutions?
What? Can they do the work? That's my question. Can universities, private schools, elementary schools, high schools, can they do the work to grow virtue so virtue can grow friendships so human communities can thrive? Can they do the work?
Yes. I think so.
Think so. Yeah. It becomes this very serious question once you ask yourself, what's going to do the work if you don't have religion? And again, I'm not talking Christianity. I'm just saying, what do people need to be good friends? What do they need? What do they have to be good friends? Is it natural, or do you have to be trained up? If you have to be trained up, who's going to do the training? Yes?
Definitely, the value system is what's important. And obviously, most of history, humans have gotten their value system from religion. Absolutely. It comes from one another. But I can think of one situation in my life where I've experienced a multicultural, multi-religional people that come into the system from these different backgrounds. And the system transformed them into a unified value system that formed some of the most impactful relationships I've ever had in my life.
And this was not faith-based?
This was not faith-based. This was the U.S. military. This was the
Oh,
Army.
wow, yeah.
Under that shared training, hardship, and intensity of the experience, we brought Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus, Christians, atheists. We all came together, Jews, and we had a shared value system that developed.
And what
as a
happened
result
after
of
the
that.
military structure that brought you together? Did it persist? Did it last afterwards?
Yes, we're still in contact with these people that I was in training with and that went through the military with. Today, we still, great thing about Facebook, right? We still have that communication that goes back and forth. There's a sense amongst us, if you ever need me for anything, for any reason, I will be there for you. They're the people that I would, if the chips were all down and I had to pick up the phone and call somebody.
Besides your wife?
Besides my wife, who's my best friend, for sure. They would be the person I'd call.
Okay, so we're out of time, and we have snacks up there. I just want to leave you with one question. Do we believe, I don't know if we're a we or a you, because I don't know if we agree yet, but that's okay. Do we believe in an ideal of friendship that expects and requires moral excellence? Or is that too elitist for us today? Is there a place and need in our world for the kind of friendship that involves a moral imperative? I mean the kind that demands goodness and high intelligence and loyalty from partners. If there is a place and need, are the women the ones to model it? So I have to return this to women, okay? Because we started with women, we got to end with women, so I had to have this last question. Are women the ones to model it? We can just leave with that on our minds.